So, okay, I was going to try and be clever about it, but I couldn't check my facts fast enough. Am I correct in remembering you're the one who said if you want to write a good horror story, get a paramedic drunk?
My recommendation for the lazy way is
Oh,
yes, ask ask a first responder or a paramedic or a cop what is the worst thing you've ever seen on the job.
hmm.
Then write that. Only really, it's secretly vampires or a ghost or Cthulhu.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to steal this from you for a minute, Ben, because this is a perfect
Oh yeah.
lead in to. Um, I so I've done a couple of these creator interviews. They always work best when you know you're the person you're talking to. So obviously I played a lot of Delta Green. Obviously I played a ton of Unknown Armies. Huge fan. I'm going to read some of the books. I will admit to not having done that. That's why Ben is here to be my literary crutch. Um, your tweets are like gold in the 21st century. I just like I could unsubscribe from every single other person and just subsist solely on the things that you write. And so
Thank you.
if you
Think
did
what I could have done if I hadn't been distracted by Twitter.
ah, I don't know, man. Like you said, like Poe's really good with his short stuff. Maybe, I don't know that anyone's paying you for them, but I certainly love them. So like I snipped a few of them, and then I honestly spent time I should have been reading God Cancer just looking for the two that I put in question 10. So I'm going to.
Oh,
I would love to talk a little about this, right? So in question 10, I said I think one of the things that I find most interesting about you are the martial arts tweets where you're talking about the dojo. And the
hmm
two that I think of quite literally almost every single day, and I'm really curious to know if this is the same individual or they just have the same kindred spirit. You were talking about a guy who like commanded an entire room to just like bring it back down to a dull roar as opposed to that like increasingly consistent, well, I'll talk louder now, I'll talk. And it's never a conscious effort, right? You just do it because
Right.
everyone's doing it. And he's like, I'm gonna do that every 10 minutes. And I was like, the fucking power that this individual held over the room. And I constantly am thinking about that. And I'm not really
I
sure
have no
why.
idea who that was. I
Oh,
was
okay.
at a martial arts convention and went up to a room party to drink someone's homemade bourbon.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I say it like that, it sounds sketchy as hell. But honestly, it worked out great.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are a number of things in my life where I'm like, yeah,
It's fine. It's
that's
probably fine.
stupid objectively, and yet it turned out wonderful. Anytime someone has offered me homemade booze, it's been really good. Which, and I'm like, I can't, in good conscience, tell people if someone says they want to take you to their hotel room and give you their homemade booze, you should definitely do that. I mean, I know sensibly, terrible advice, and yet
But it's worked for me.
experientially.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was just some guy who was in town from California or Hawaii, and yeah, as gatherings do, everyone was. There was this natural thing. Just always like, excuse me, everybody. Could we just lower our voices a little bit, and then we won't have it won't be so loud, and I'll do this in another 10 or 15 minutes if it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone just was like, oh yeah, that's a
Right.
really good idea. So what was the other one? Because I'm sure it's a different person.
Yeah, well, it seems like it has to be at this point. I mean, and there's a lot of them. Like I snipped a few of them and just left them in here to just really give the interview the spirit of what I was looking for out of it. But the other one was the Mr. Rogers individual who preached like kindness, compassion, and patience, but then had like grips that made it feel like fire was coursing through every vein in your body.
Yep.
And I was
That was also at the convention, but a different guy.
okay.
And he was probably in his mid to late 60s, if
Mm-hmm.
not older, and had been doing jujitsu, for forever.
100 years
There's
roughly.
there are some of these guys who okay, you want to hear a true tale of martial arts adventure?
We do.
So there was a guy who he's probably 65 or 70 at the time that this happens. And we find out that he had he had a dojo up north, and was really tight with my instructors, and they're like, oh yeah, apparently he had some serious heart trouble, and they put 7 stents in him.
Wow.
And so when we're talking with him about this, he's like, yeah, I got to take it easy now. They won't let me shovel any snow anymore. He lives in Minnesota, shoveling his own snow at 65 or something. And he's like, yeah. He's like, the doctor said it was really weird because I didn't have any symptoms except that I would get tunnel vision while wrestling. And we're like, who were you wrestling with? He's like, oh, these college kids. And I'm like,
surely you jest.
Well, this is just a guy who has been an athlete his whole life, knows nothing else, and was in such surreally good shape that with his heart clogged to these tiny little pinholes, he could still function perfectly well, right, except that his lungs couldn't keep up with it. It's like when you hear about that one hypermiler who, it's like, oh yeah, he doesn't really get tired the way people do. If he didn't have to sleep, he would just theoretically be able to run until he died.
This seems about right. Yeah, I mean, you
have of old age.
Right. You have to, I mean, obviously you know this, but right, you have to remember there are, 7 billion people on the planet and growing. There's a few of us that are really, really weird.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah, but, there are always, crazy physical outliers. So, that's really and cool. Yeah, and one way to meet fascinating outliers is, do the martial arts for a couple decades, and you'll meet some people who can do amazing things.
I've got 2 more in here, and I'll end on the good one, and then we'll pivot back towards, like something resembling actual content and purpose, and not me just telling you I really enjoy your tweets. But another one that I put in there was is that April 1st, interestingly enough, says power unexercised is indistinguishable from weakness. Me encouraging my wife to make the kids do the chores, which is just beautiful on so many different levels.
Yeah, every now and then I just go full supervillain. Look, what would Dr. Doom say in this power unexercised is indistinguishable from weakness?
Right, but what he's actually right, and then we rack focus, and he's wearing a dishcloth or a dish towel or something.
Yeah, and so yeah, it's a joke. That's a terrible way to live your life. So
I shouldn't have that above my headboard. Okay. Yeah, I get you. Ben, you were saying something, I think.
I wasn't, but I can.
Do you want to? You get to say one thing.
Hi everybody. That's it. That's all I got.
You wasted your one thing on hi everybody.
Having a good time.
One. Oh my goodness. Okay. So then I'll I mean, obviously not end the interview certainly, but I'll end me talking about your tweets deliberately. This might just happen by happenstance. One that I copied down was, if you don't support what matters to you, it'll go away. And I think that is incredibly relevant today in modern society. When it comes to creativity, when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to writing, when it comes to literally anything, quite literally.
Well, and politics. I mean, if
there it is.
You do not, yeah, I mean, if you do not prioritize maintaining essential civil liberties, yeah, they're not like a weed that's just going to flourish wherever there's an empty patch of dirt. They're like increasingly looking like a rare orchid that must be lovingly tended with an eyedropper.
Grown in darkness, usually with ice, finicky, strangely colored.
Yeah, and so this is, well, it's an interesting time to be a creative, because the barriers to being some kind of creative have never been lower. And the barriers to being a massively successful, super rich creator are extremely high. And it's very hard to get from, down here to way up here. And more, I'm like, do you really need to be way up here? I'm thinking about, okay, this will rile up the nerds.
Let's do it.